Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat, Cascadia. As the scorching heat of summer continues, I hope you'll retreat with us into the thick wilderness, dip a toe in an alpine lake, and reflect on the perfection of nature. This week we travel north to a place just miles away from the Canadian border. Double knot those hiking boots, top off your hydro flask, and let's get going. Have any deep, dark secrets you need to purge in a safe way? Let me suggest you take a trip to the North Cascades, specifically Mount Baker. Find a clear patch of trail and shout those secrets into the crisp, clear banks of this peak. She's been keeping secrets for centuries, from ghost towns to missing persons, hidden Bigfoot lairs. Mount Baker would rather erupt than reveal your secrets to a soul. But like usual, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with the facts. Mount Baker is also known as Koma Kulshan, or simply Kulshan. It's 10,781 feet high and an active glacier-covered andesitic stratovolcano. Mount Baker has the second most thermally active crater in the Cascade Range after Mount St. Helens. The mountain lies about 30 miles due east of Bellingham, Washington. After Mount Rainier, Mount Baker has the heaviest glacier cover of the Cascade Range volcanoes. Its volume of snow and ice is greater than that of all the other Cascade volcanoes combined, except if you have to take out Mount Rainier. It's one of the snowiest places in the world. In fact, in 1999, Mount Baker ski area set the world record for recorded snowfall in a single season, which was a grand total of 1,140 inches. Mount Baker is visible from southern Canada and as far south as Tacoma, Washington. From Kittle, indigenous peoples have known the mountain for thousands of years. They've called it a variation of Koma Kulshan or Kulshan, and it can mean white sentinel because of her white snowy banks, or puncture wound for the crater, and there's actually 2 craters on the peak. But the first written record of the peak is from a Spanish explorer. His name was Gonzalo Lopez de Haro. He mapped it in 1790 as Gran Montaña del Carmelo, or Great Mount Carmel, because of its striking similarity to Mount Carmel. The explorer George Vancouver renamed the mountain for his 3rd Lieutenant Joseph Baker of HMS Discovery, who saw the mountain peak on April 30th, 1792. The first governor of Washington Territory, Isaac I. Stevens, wrote about Mount Baker in 1853. He said, "Mount Baker is one of the loftiest and most conspicuous peaks of the northern Cascade Range. It is nearly as high as Mount Rainier, and like that mountain, its snow-covered pyramid has the form of a sugar loaf. It is for this region a natural and important landmark." From a Scientific American article, according to one legend, once Mount Baker, known previously as Koma Kulshan, got so mad that a big piece fell off and slid way down the mountain, causing a big fire and a loud thunder. The first ascent of Mount Baker dates back to the 1800s. Edmund Thomas Coleman, an Englishman who resided in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and a veteran of the Alps, made the first attempt to ascend the mountain in 1866. He used a route along the Skagit River, but had to turn back when local Native Americans refused him passage. It was some months later, Coleman recruited 3 Whatcom County settlers, Eldridge, Bennett, and Tennant, to aid his second attempt. This time, they approached via the North Fork of the Nooksack River. They navigated what is now known as Coleman Glacier and then ascended to within several hundred feet of the summit when they were confronted with an overhanging cornice of ice and threatening weather and chose to turn back. 2 years later, Coleman, Eldridge, Tennant, and 2 new climbing friends, Ogilvie and Stratton, returned and scaled the summit using the Middle Fork, Nooksack River, Marmot Ridge, Coleman Glacier, and the north margin of the Roman Wall to complete their task. There was a missing persons case highlighted by Missing 411's David Politis. In his YouTube video from his YouTube channel, he presents cases from Washington and Florida. I've put the links to the exact video in the show notes so you don't have to go on a wild goose chase for it. Watch the whole entire episode. In it, Politis tells the story of Jason Lee Lovelady. He went missing October 5th, 2013, and noted that the Whatcom County sheriffs would not release the case files to Politis, even though Washington state has a disclosure law, and it's a case that's almost a decade old. So, in the video, Politis stated he knows of no leads or suspects, but of course we don't know what's in the Whatcom County Sheriff's back pocket, what they know, what they're withholding. But I just present this without judgment. Here are more case facts. The incident happened on Elbow Lake Trailhead in Mount Baker National Forest. Jason was with his mother, Starlet, and his stepfather collecting fir cones in a 3-gallon bucket, like one of those plastic Home Depot buckets. Somewhere around 2 p.m., Jason told the others he was going off to relieve himself and was never seen again. It wasn't long after that his mother called for help. The sheriff that responded said about the incident, and this is a direct quote, "It's kind of a strange one. We have no real indication he's here." And I have to interject, what? They had 3 K9 teams looking for Jason, as well as a helicopter, and it was soon after he went missing. Jason Lee Lovelady was from Concrete, Washington. They never found a trace of him, not even that 3-gallon plastic bucket. In the video that I linked to, Politis at the 5106 mark, Politis says, Mount Baker is a pretty strange area, and there's a lot of weird things going on up there. Lots of UFO sightings, lots of Bigfoot activity, lots of weirdness up there, and I have to agree. If you or someone you know has any information about the disappearance of Jason Lee Lovelady, would you please contact the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office? Their number is 360-778-6633. Next, we're shifting gears to a strange cult that led to a bloody fracturing, a haunted hike, a train disaster, and a ghost town. I'll share more after a quick break.
Hey everybody, Karen Rontowski here. I hate to interrupt the Curious Cat podcast, one of my favorites, but if you want to double your paranormal fun when you're done here, come check out my show, Paranormal Karen. I interview exorcists, demonologists, healers, psychics, really anyone that can make a family gathering uncomfortable is on my show. If you want to see everything I do, go to KarenRontowski.com. And I know you're thinking, that sounds hard to spell. Well, it is. I have misspelled it on hundreds of tax forms. So if that doesn't work for you, go to PsychicStandup.com or ParanormalKaren.com. There you can find my Patreon, you can book a tarot reading, you can take a tarot class, you can find everything, including my stand-up comedy clips. That's right, I've been doing stand-up for 30 years. If you go to those places, you can also see my psychic stand-up show where I mix psychic and tarot readings. Yes, the future never looked so funny. So check me out at KarenRontowski.com, ParanormalKaren.com, or PsychicStandup.com. And can someone please find me a marketing person to put all this in one place? Now back to the show.
Okay, this next story, a battle between cults, I have to give all the credit to my adult kids who stumbled upon the town of Edison, Washington, which is also now known for being a little tourist town that you can do wine tastings and things. But they said it had distinctly midsummer vibes, if you are familiar with the spooky movie. But the town itself, it was once home to Edward R. Murrow. Yeah, that Edward R. Murrow. But way back when, the town had this cult thing happening. The midsummer vibes that I'm talking about, it's that disturbing movie. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm not sure if I recommend it. It's kind of spooky, but go for it if that's your vibe. First settled in 1869 by Ben Sampson. The town was later named for inventor Thomas Edison, but in 1898, it was home to a national utopian socialist project known as Equality Colony, backed by an organization known as the Brotherhood of the Cooperative Commonwealth. This comes from Wikipedia. The socialist colony was established on 280 acres just outside Edison, and it engaged in farming and timber milling and included a school as well as blacksmith and copperworking shops. The Edison-based Brotherhood also published a newspaper called Industrial Freedom for national circulation to its approximately 3,000 supporters. The socialist community folded shortly after 1903, by which time only about 100 colony members remained. Equality Colony was a United States socialist colony founded in Skagit County, Washington, by a political organization known as the Brotherhood of the Cooperative Commonwealth in 1897. It was meant to serve as a model which would convert the rest of Washington and later the entire continent to socialism. So again, according to Wikipedia, the first 15 settlers arrived on November 1st, 1897, and named the colony after Edward Bellamy's new book, Equality. By the time that the National Board, their families, and the others arrived in March, the first building, Fort Bellamy, was finished and several others were in progress. However, most members of the BCC board stayed in nearby Edison, where they leased a national headquarters for the Brotherhood. By that summer, membership had reached 3,000 members and 18 states had organizers. Through the organization department and the group's newspaper, Industrial Freedom, which began in May, the Brotherhood maintained its national character. Former Appeal to Reason writer George Boom was among the editors of Industrial Freedom, the weekly newspaper of Equality Colony. However, dissension developed between the colonists at Equality and the BCC leaders at Edison. The colonists resented that their money was being used to keep the administration in town, while they lived in the crude, unfinished buildings at the colony site. They also objected to the administration's emphasis on the creation of a national organization and other colonies, feeling that the more immediate goal should be the completion of equality. In early April, at the contentious meeting of the two factions, a plan to start an additional colony at Edison of the administrators was defeated, and the Equality colonists proposed an amendment giving the colony complete independence in internal affairs, which passed by a vote of 298 to 176. Auguste Lermont resigned from the BCC and returned to Maine, where he founded a new group, the Industrial Brotherhood. By the end of that year, most of the board members had left, and in January 1899, a new slate of officers favored by the colonists were elected, and that February, BCC headquarters was moved to Equality. From that point, membership in the BCC fell to nearly 300, material support and new members from the outside dried up, and industrial freedom circulation plummeted. The Brotherhood of the Cooperative Commonwealth as an organization was subsumed by Equality. While lip service was given to the idea of planting new colonies and socializing Washington for the next few years, little was actually done toward those objectives and was eventually forgotten. The colony did flourish for a few years, building 2 large apartments buildings, a barn, a dining room, a kitchen, a schoolhouse, a public hall, a storeroom, a printing office, a sawmill, a root house, a blacksmith and copper shop, an apiary, which is wow, I just made that connection to what the girls experience. An apiary is actually like beehives, right? Harvesting honey. A bakery, a cereal and coffee house, and a milk house. Its population fluctuated, but was about 100 by the spring of 1903, when only the diehards remained. Harry Alt, who would later play a role in the Seattle General Strike of 1919 as editor of the Seattle Union Record, he arrived with his family at age 14 in April 1898, and he began to learn journalism and printing by working on Industrial Freedom. So he eventually became its editor until the publication folded in December 1902. Also started Young Socialist in 1899 for the colony's children. In 1900 and 1901, some colonists left equality to found a new community on Whidbey Island, and they called themselves the Free Land Association, or Freeland. This colony should not be confused with equality in its later stages, which was sometimes referred to as Freeland Colony. So that's super confusing, right? The final factor in the demise of the colony occurred on February 6th, 1906, when an unknown person or group of people set fire to several buildings at night. The worst loss was the barn, which burned completely to the ground, killing most of the colony's cattle. The perpetrator was never identified, but each faction blamed the other for the arson. A suit was filed in Skagit County to dissolve the colony, and the BCC went into receivership. Its history ended when its land was sold for $12,500 to John J. Peth on June 1, 1907. A few families stayed in the area on plots of land that they owned individually. Okay, I have to do a footnote and circle back to what I said. So my kids were doing their little touristy thing in the area, and they came upon Edison, Washington just a few weeks ago. And every single store had this like kind of homage to apiary, like beehive stuff. And they were saying that it had this kind of spooky feel to it, that in particular, that piece. And now we understand why, because of course I started doing research on my end and I found all this information, and it all links back to these original founding people, right? I'm not saying that's why the shopkeepers have that stuff there, but that was the link that kind of had their third eye and mind like lighting up. I promised you a haunted story about a haunted hike. Well, it has its roots in a horrible disaster at Iron Goat Trail. And it's called the Hike of Wellington Ghost Town. You can do the hike. It's a 2-mile loop. And I've linked in the show notes if you're in the area to do the hike, because it's kind of one of those spooky summertime activities. And you may want to get one of those little, lights that you strap onto your hat so that you can have a little light when you go into the dark tunnel. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The town of Wellington ceased to be, at least in name, long before it officially became a ghost town. The town was founded in 1893 at the west portal of the Cascade Tunnel along the Great Northern Railway. The town included a train depot that was unfortunately destined to become the site of the deadliest avalanche in U.S. history. It was March 1st, 1910. A passenger train and a mail train were stuck at the Wellington depot, waiting out a blizzard that had been raging for 9 days. During the night, while most people were sleeping, an avalanche hit the trains and the station, quickly sweeping everything about 150 feet downhill into the Tyee River Valley. 96 people were killed in the event. Only 23 survived. In October of 1910, Wellington was quietly renamed Tyee to ease the fears of travelers who would associate the name Wellington with this tragic event. In the same month that the town was renamed, work began on the snow sheds designed to protect the rails and passing trains from future avalanches. Some of these sheds are still standing today. Tyee was abandoned in 1929 when the second Cascade Tunnel, which is still in use today, was completed, and it negated the need for trains to pass through the town. To reach Wellington, you'll follow the original path of the Great Northern Railroad along what is now the eastern portion of the Iron Goat Trail near Stevens Pass. Head east on the trail from the parking lot to see old foundations and the west entrance to the original Cascade Tunnel. Walk west from the parking lot to enter the snow sheds and reach the site of the tragic 1910 avalanche. In the article that I posted to that gives you the details on the hike, they make a note that I wanted to note here as well. Like other railroads in Washington state, this track was laid by 800 workers, many of them Japanese immigrants. The Wing Luke Museum in Seattle offers hiking tours of this history. And in Gary Christ's 2008 book, The White Cascade, it chronicles the historic avalanche for anyone interested in more information on the history of this particular area. We're going to turn next to the tragic disappearance of Leah Roberts. There's a 23-year-old missing persons case that occurred within the Mount Baker National Forest. Leah Roberts had recently lost both of her parents in separate tragic ways when she herself was in a terrible car accident. Instead of feeling defeated, Leah made a miraculous recovery, feeling full of life. Instead of finishing her final semester of college in North Carolina, she packed up her car, left a note with cash for her roommate to cover rent and bills for the month, then followed in the footsteps of her favorite author, Jack Kerouac, and headed west to Washington State, where he'd been a fire scout in the Mount Baker Forest. So that's where everything sounds pretty peachy, doesn't it? She was in her car. She ended up adopting a cat named Bee, and then she ends up going west. They have cash receipts of her spending money for gas in Oregon. Then she goes north, and they know that she went to a movie at Bellis Fair, which is a mall in Bellingham, Washington, and she watched a movie. And then they got a statement from people in the restaurant near the movie theater that she had been speaking with one, maybe two men while she was eating food there after the movie. And it's really strange. You can go on YouTube and there are a lot of accounts of what may or may not have happened because they still haven't found any trace of Leah Roberts. When she went missing, she was 5'6" tall. She was 130 pounds. She had sandy blonde hair. She had a beauty mark above her lip. She had a scar on her right hip from the surgery that she needed after that car accident. She went missing, they guess, March 13th, 2000. And the only trace of her was her car that was, had been accelerated over they wanted to call it a cliff, but actually it was a shorter cliff. And there was no trace of blood there. There was no trace of her cat. All they had was questions. And then a few years later, when people popped the hood, they found that there was something important in the mechanical system underneath the hood that was cut, which would have been allowed somebody to, without using the gas pedal, actually accelerate the car over that bluff or cliff and make it look like that's how somebody had died. And the reason I bring that up is one of the two men that she allegedly encountered in the restaurant, he happened to be a mechanic and he was also in the Army. But, so did she want to go missing? Did she say enough at that meal that somebody thought you're the perfect victim because you're saying you're following Jack Kerouac's footsteps and you're kind of off the grid? The other thing that's kind of odd is the note that she left with her roommate had this Cheshire cat drawing. And I couldn't help but think of in Alice in Wonderland, the cat disappears and reappears and disappears. And there's always just the trace of the nose and the whiskers and the smile. So there's just more questions than answers. And again, much like the conversation that we had at the top, if you have any clues to Leah Roberts, even if it seems trivial 23 years later, I'm sure the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office would love to hear from you. And the number that was listed in the most recent posting on it is 360-676-6650. I've also left a couple links in the show notes if you want to watch the most recent little documentary done on it in YouTube. I think Motor Trends did, believe it or not, because it involved a car. They did a little story about it, which is pretty captivating. I also wanted to share with you the story of Koma Kulshan and his 2 wives. And according to the Lummi people, Koma Kulshan had a favorite wife and he had a second wife. So the favorite wife was the most beautiful of the pair and eventually gave birth to 3 children. The other wife was not as beautiful as the first, but was much more kind and charming. Though in time, Koma Kulshan grew to love the second wife more than the first for her caring nature, showering her with affection and attention. This made the first wife very jealous, and she believed that Koma Kulshan should love her more as she was more beautiful and the mother of his children. So she yelled at him, but he only smiled. Angry, the first wife threatened to leave him and their children, thinking it would make him beg for her to stay, but he did not. Instead, he told her that she may go as soon and as far as she pleased. So the first wife slowly packed her things, filling her pack with various plants, seeds, and roots. Seeing her pack to leave, her children longed for her to stay, which pleased her, as surely Koma Kulshan would surely change his mind and ask her to stay, but he didn't. When she left, she moved slowly along the mountain valleys, thinking that Koma Kulshan would not be far behind, calling for her to come back. But he did not, so she kept going. Some ways further, she climbed to the top of a hill so that she could see her, and so that he could see her, and waited a moment for Koma Kulshan to call her back, but he did not. She continued traveling among hills and mountains that slowly got taller until they were out of view. Standing atop an even taller hill, she stretched herself on her tiptoes to be able to see them, but still Koma Kulshan did not call out. By this time, she was sure that Kulshan did not want her to come back and had become very tall from stretching herself to see her family. So she made camp where she stood, tending to the garden of plants, seeds, and roots that she brought with her, resting nicely, knowing that on her clear days her family could see her. The first wife is now known as Mount Rainier, and it is said that the native plants growing in the spring and summer months are from her garden. The second wife lived with Koma Kulshan for many years after the first wife left, and eventually became pregnant with a child. The first wife longed to be with her mother, who was on an island in modern-day Puget Sound. But Koma Kulshan was worried as the island was far away, and there was no clear path from their tribe to her mother, only mountains and trees. Determined to see her mother, the second wife told her husband that he would have to create a way for her to travel, and so he did. Calling on all the animals with digging paws, he asked them to dig a long, deep ditch, and so with ease, bears, beavers, marmots, cougars, rats, moles, and mice all got to work digging a ditch to the island. After they finished, Koma Kulshan moved the water from the mountains to fill the hole, creating a path said to be wide enough for 2 canoes, and today that river is called the Nooksack River. Filling her canoe with different types of foods, the second wife took off down the river. She eventually stopped at an island to eat the mussels she brought, leaving some there before continuing. She then did the same on another, eating and leaving camas behind her, and again on each island she passed, leaving every type of food she brought with her. Now, each of the islands that she visited is named after the type of food that can be found left behind by the second wife. Finally, she made it to an island called Flat Top Island in the Puget Sound. There she stayed, laying down to become what is known as Speedin Island. When her child was born, it became a smaller island of a similar shape known today as Sentinel Island. Sometime after, Koma Kulshan began to miss his wife, so he decided to pack up his things with his children and leave so that he could be closer with the second wife and the first wife. Stretching himself so he could be seen by them, Koma Kulshan became almost as tall as the first wife and is now known as Mount Baker. His children grew up to the sky and were said to have become known as what is now the Twin Sisters Mountain. Okay, I cannot talk about Mount Baker without dipping a toe in Bigfoot lore, because This county, Whatcom County, where Mount Baker lies, is so squatchy. And if you're not familiar with it, BFRO.net, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, is a fantastic online resource. If you want to click on your state's county, you can find out what the latest reports are. And I have to tell you that Whatcom County, from their website, in June 1992, the council passed a resolution declaring Whatcom County a Sasquatch protection and refuge area. It states, whereas legend purported recent findings and spore recent Bigfoot may exist, and whereas if such a creature exists, it is inadequately protected and in danger of death and injury. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Whatcom County Council that Whatcom County is hereby declared a Sasquatch protection and refuge area, effective immediately. This resolution unanimously passed. So I hope we can agree. Mount Baker is a magical place. It's rife with Bigfoot encounters, full of lush woods and pristine waterways. I hope this episode has sparked your curiosity and you plan a future trip, if not to Mount Baker, but to your nearby park or forest. Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat Cascadia. If you like the content, give us a like and a review on your favorite stream. We would be grateful. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.